You've worked with other psychedelics in a spiritual capacity, and what were those before you actually moved on to?
I'd done a lot of psychedelics before I'd actually had my first ayahuasca experience. Actually, my most profound psychedelic experience had been with magic mushrooms, but I'd had some pretty strong experiences with weed, actually, and with acid, LSD. I'd had one very interesting experience with PCP, angel dust. But the main ones, in a very spiritual capacity, I would say psilocybin mushrooms. And I got to tell you, just before we proceed, psilocybin mushrooms, if you take enough of them, are comparable to the full-blown ayahuasca experience. They're not at all the same. I don't know if you're going to ask that. They're not the same, but they are comparable.
And you then decided to travel to South America in pursuit of ayahuasca.
Yes.
So where exactly did you travel to?
I traveled to a small village in the sacred valley called Pisa.
And when you traveled around South America, before we actually start to talk about ayahuasca, you must have seen some interesting sights. And one of them that is quite significant and quite famous and comes up quite often is the Nazca lines.
So you can tell that Elaine and I have some prepped here because yeah, this is a photograph of the Nazca lines. I have flown over the Nazca lines. They are quite something. You cannot see these from the ground. You can only see these from the air. What's really interesting about them is they're in a very arid desert-like region called Nazca in Peru, and if it rained just once, those lines will be washed away. It hasn't rained in that region for at least 800 years. Not once. You cannot see them on the ground. And interestingly enough, you might think that this bird, there's a monkey, there's a spaceman, there's all sorts of stuff. You might think that these things are mounds of rock. They're made up of little mounds of rock, but they're not. They're actually made up of grooves. And when you walk around, you cannot see the groove. It's a big mystery as to what they represent and how they landed up there, although the latest theory is that in actual fact some sort of either precursor to ayahuasca or ayahuasca itself had something to do with it. These are visions that were quite common to the locals at the time, and they simply represented them on the ground, facing the sky, because it's such an astral type of experience, I suppose you'd say. But there were many things. So I traveled a little bit in Brazil, but mainly in Peru. And Peru, this was one of the highlights, absolutely, but there are some amazing things in that country. Whether you go for ayahuasca or not, it's really a place worth visiting, just from the perspective of, it's like we talk about South Africa as being a world in one country. Peru, I mean, really, they have the most hardcore type jungle that you can imagine. They have the Andes Mountains. They have desert. I mean, I was in the desert one day, and you literally from horizon to horizon, you see nothing. There's nothing. There's no bush. There's no tree. There's nothing but this gold sand. And then they've got these crazy cities. Awesome place to visit. And then the ruins. I mean, the other thing is an amazing heritage, because the Incans were there. And the Incans have left behind, and I suppose the Spanish conquistadors after them, and anyone Nash that might have been there before, have left behind like some amazing ruins that you can go and explore. Probably the most famous of which is Machu Picchu. Yeah.
We wanted to try and give you an idea of what Pisac is like. So there's a short video clip that we're going to play, and Lyndon will talk you through it, just to show you what the life in Pisac is like if you actually decide to visit this village. And I think most of Peru the communities would be very similar to this.
Certainly up in the Sacred Valley, which is a valley up in the Andes Mountains, everywhere you go, similar to what you're about to see. Want me to talk over something? Can we pause it?
Just tell me when.
So, okay, pause it. So just...
Okay, let's try that again.
Anyway, what you were seeing there is you see a lot of people in traditional outfits.
Sorry, let me just go back.
They really, that's how they walk around. They live and are that way. It's not, they don't dress up just for tourists. They literally, that's the clothes they have, that's what they wear, that's how they walk around day in and day out. And a lot of it harps back to how they were in Incan times. A lot of the stuff would have been the same sort of stuff that they were wearing back in the day. These are some of the main streets of Pisac. You can see it's very small. Potatoes, major part of the diet. Major part. They have something like, I don't know, 45 or something different varieties of potato in Peru. You know, we think of the potato. This is the market. Actually, Pisac is served by a bunch of farms around it, so a lot of the food that you get there is fresh. You can buy it in the market. You can buy it from little restaurants that are around. These are some of the pottery you see. Ayahuasca diet soup. So there is tourism that comes into Pisac, and very much tourists that come to drink ayahuasca. There's whole hordes that arrive there for that. Not the only thing. I mean, Pisac is known actually more for its market than for its ayahuasca, but that is why people travel there. A lot of this. A lot of the material that you see, the designs that you see, are very. What would you call it? Typical of ayahuasca visions, and they've been represented in the embroidery of the people that live all over this area.
So pausing is not an option, unfortunately, with this very high-tech media player. The ayahuasca diet, could you tell us more about that? Because we saw a sign that says ayahuasca diet soups.
Yeah, ayahuasca diet soups. If I think Ian's going to talk a little bit more about dietas that he's actually done. And it's not quite as intense as what that be, but you have this idea that you should, eat healthy. And so a lot of what these guys will do is they'll put up their signs to say ayahuasca diet, because they know that the gringos like myself are coming into town, and so then we go into these things thinking that we're basically eating the right stuff. But you can get the right stuff by just buying in the market.
And there's a lot of interesting fruit and fruit juices.
Yeah, actually, like one of the most common things that you'll get offered when you go, not just Pisac, anywhere, is actually fruit juices. They mix in pineapples, they mix in bananas, they mix in oranges, they mix in all over. They actually even mix in aloe, and it's supposed to be quite good for you. So the one thing to watch out for is you make sure that you ask for an orange juice base and not a water base, because the water there, unfortunately, their water treatment system is not, shall we say, disease-free. So it's actually been infected by things like Giardia and so on. These colors are amazing. I mean, like the vividness of the colors that you see in Peru. That's something.
And in terms of accommodation, what's the accommodation?
So if you're going to go to Pisac, for instance, there's one or two hotels there, but mostly people will go and stay in hostels. Or if you're going to stay there for a long time, like I did, then you can rent a house. And there's small communities of people that are renting houses. So I moved in with some people and just lived in the house there. And they're not that expensive, actually. So for a hostel, I was spending about 15 Rand a night. And you get a warm shower. Well, it's more like a warm trickle. You get that.
And the actual people and the locals, how did you find them friendly? What is the local community like?
The locals are very friendly. They're very cool people. They're very, very down to earth, so they're not like, you might think, geez man, these guys drink ayahuasca every second day, so they're like, whoa, way up there in the stars. No, they are very practical. This is how, very simple life. This is how they make money. They make money in the market. They sell what they make. Here's some of the juicing. They make these little instruments or whatever, or they get supplies coming in from Lima, the capital, to go and sell in the market. That's how they make their money. Every day they put up their market stalls. Every evening they'll take them down and they'll carry the whole damn thing back to their little houses and come back the next day. So it's a very almost subsistence type of way of living.
And would you say it's safe?
It's safe in parts. It's actually a really good question. It's not like Joburg, okay, where, but in the small towns it tends to be safe. So like Pisach, Ollantaytambo, and so on. But if you go to the bigger cities like Lima and like Cusco, you have gangs, you have, the usual city urban violence and all that sort of stuff. So you do have to be careful, but not terrible. Another thing though about the locals, which is quite interesting, is that most of them do not speak a word of English. And you won't speak a word of Spanish, So a lot of it is like, por favor, and that's just something to bear in mind.
Sorry.
You will, when you go to this sort of community, probably gravitate towards Westerners, gringos, and hang out with them. Most of them are going to be there because they've come to do ayahuasca, or San Pedro is quite popular, Huachuma. But in time, if you spend a really long time, you'll begin to learn Spanish, and then that begins to open up a whole new dynamic for you because, you get to interact with them.
Now, in terms of once you're in South America, how easy is it to stay in touch with friends and family in South Africa? I mean, what's the connectivity like?
It actually reminds me of a phone call one evening, like after I'd been tripping. I was still quite high. I came and I decided to phone Elaine at about, I don't know, I think it must be about 6 a.m. here, and she was pissed off that I phoned her to tell her how much I loved her.
Pre-plant, Elaine.
Because I was high. It's not that difficult. There's a lot of internet cafes around. The internet is not that expensive. I mean, even in the mountains of Peru, you must know, like to get the lines there and to get the Wi-Fi towers installed, those engineers had to do some pretty intense work just to get the structures in place. But they've got them in place. The bandwidth is fairly good in places like Pisach. When you get into Peru, into the big cities like Cusco, Lima, and so on, they've got 4G LTE. So through the internet, through Skype and so on, it's not that expensive, about 2-3 rand an hour, and you can stay in touch with your family. And phone calls, they're international calls, so they're going to be expensive because of, but you can do that too. So it's not that difficult.
And just an interesting question, do you find that people tend to go more to Peru than Brazil, because these are the two main countries to drink ayahuasca? And what made you decide to go to Peru instead of Brazil?
That's an interesting question, actually. Nothing specifically made me go to Peru other than that. Like when I decided who I was going to go and drink with, that person happened to be a Peruvian. But my impression is that more and more people are going to Peru than Brazil, because Peru's reputation seems to be around like sort of things that you've just seen here. So Inca type heritage, a very strong heritage around ayahuasca, and a lot of people offering it. There is that in Brazil, but Brazil's also beset by a lot of big cities and a very strong emerging economy. So you see a lot of industry going around there. And I think while the jungle is quite profound and people have very profound ayahuasca experiences, so I'm told, in Brazil, I think that most people don't see it as much that way. Rio is a place of carnival and stuff. Whereas Peru, if you actually visited Lima or Cusco, any of these, you'd realize like they're not really tourist attractions as such. What you really want to go for is more this heritage, and embedded in that heritage really is things like ayahuasca.
Super, thank you. And you've singled out a specific facilitator by the name of Diego Palmer. Can you tell us something about Diego? And we've actually got a little bit of a video clip to show you to give regarding. Let's start with that.
So simple and clear. When you let go of fear, the truth will appear. So simple and clear. There's a feeling inside, so deep and so wide, so open and free. Madre ayahuasca, aquí están tus hijos, hoy hemos venido para estar contigo. Madre ayahuasca,
So you've lost his talking.
que hoy están conmigo.
It's the wrong video on YouTube.
There was a voiceover to this video that she's lost.
Ayahuasca, curaciones
It's just a
pido
different download.
para mis hermanos
That's Diego there.
que hoy están conmigo. Madre ayahuasca, muéstranos caminos, pintando visiones por un buen destino.
Okay, so I'll talk. Okay, so just to give you a sense of what all that was about. So Diego has a retreat that he offers, and people travel from all over the world really to go and stay on that retreat. And that's what you saw in the beginning. That's his house. You see his little temple is that kind of like adobe rondavel that he has.
And
Inside,
where is that retreat, if I can
it's
ask?
in Pisach.
And that's more Andes, so right now we...
Yeah, you saw, when you live in Pisach, as you could see, it was quite nicely shown that you're living among these mountains. I mean, in the place where I was staying, you could open the door, you'd literally walk 50 meters and you begin a journey up a mountain. That's how it was. I mean, these majestic things are right there. Then you saw his temple, and then you saw the people drinking, and that's the sort of space that he offers. So a little bit about him. He, I bumped into him. I didn't know him. No one had told me about him. I bumped into him on the internet one day when I was doing research. I wanted to go and drink ayahuasca. I wanted to go to South America because I felt one had to go to the homeland to do it. And I was searching around, and I just saw a picture of him. And relative to a lot of the other guys who were, and maybe this is because their website development skills aren't as good, he just looked really good. He had that whole Buddhist vibe that goes with it. He just has that aura of peacefulness. And I just thought, I think this is a good place to start. So I subscribed. Actually, the first time I went was to one of those workshops that you saw. This is pretty much an advert for one of those. But where Diego's quite interesting, I suppose what's important to understand about him is, there's several shamans in South America, or facilitators or ayahuasqueros who offer a space where you can drink ayahuasca and they give you healing, or they give you teaching or whatever. Diego was trained in that, and he has a background in that, but he had decided to break away from that tradition because he felt that it was a little bit exclusionary to other people in the world, so particularly Westerners. And he had this thought that if he could somehow open up a space that Westerners would feel comfortable in, and spread the message of ayahuasca, that he'd be doing good for the world. So that's what he did. And where things are a little bit different is you don't see the traditional garb on him. He doesn't dress up in a lot of feathers. He doesn't rattle much. He's got a chakapa somewhere, but that's not really a lot of the music that he makes. He doesn't sing Icaros, which I think will be spoken about a little bit later. He sings a lot of songs, and you heard actually two of the songs playing over the video is the sort of music that he plays when he's facilitating an ayahuasca ceremony. And what's also really nice is you can offer a song. So I could bring a guitar in if I wanted to, and I can ask him, Diego, do you mind if I play right now? And he'll let you play. If he feels the space is right, he'll let you play what you want to play. And so in a way, what that creates, which is a little bit different to, so you have your traditional shaman who is now holding the space and really directing the way things are going to go, is it becomes a lot more, I guess the word would be unified. The experience is a lot more unified, a lot more communal within the ceremony itself.
I must say that's the thing that interested me about Diego, and that's why I wanted to add Lyndon to this panel, is because it gives a nice perspective because Diego Palma is a very non-traditional type of facilitator. And from our next speakers soon we'll hear the more traditional shamans from South America and what those experiences have been. Now, what I'd like to ask Lyndon now is probably something that you've all been waiting for. Lyndon, can you tell us some of your ayahuasca experiences, maybe your first ayahuasca experience? Can you describe that for us? Because your first ayahuasca experience was with Diego Palma. Would you like to describe that for the audience?
Yeah, my first ayahuasca experience is probably the worst ayahuasca experience that I've had. And in actual fact, I often hear that when people talk about their first experience. Not always, but a lot of people will say it was the worst. It was the worst for me because ayahuasca differs, I think, in a very, certainly the way that ayahuasca is treated is different. It differs in the way that, say, mushrooms are treated or San Pedro is treated. Up until that point, I'd been dropping acid or eating mushrooms by myself. And now for the first time, and I'm really wanting to do this DMT, but I'm surrounded by other people. And on that first day, I mean, we drank, the first day that I arrived at his workshop is the first day that we drink. So you arrive off the plane, you're a little bit bamboozled, you're up there, so the altitude, and you're a little short of breath. And you're just like, okay, and he says, cool, we're drinking this evening. Sit down, and now I'm surrounded by people I've never met before in my life, and I know that there's this whole purging aspect to ayahuasca. Okay, so I'm going to be hurling in front of these people. And I couldn't bring myself to do it. So I drank ayahuasca, and I sat there, and really, instead of letting go and, traveling into the far reaches of the universe, I was pretty much in my body holding on, like, no, do not vomit, do not vomit, do not vomit, with the waves of puke just creeping up my neck for 5 hours of that. That was my first experience.
And then when you eventually did purge on your subsequent experiences, was it really so bad?
No, so I mean, I made the promise to myself that I would purge, doesn't matter. I mean, these other people were purging. I would purge, it was okay. And my second ayahuasca experience, absolutely to this day, one of the most profound experiences of my life.
What would you describe as your best ayahuasca experience? Would you say that was your second one?
My second one might have been my most life-changing ayahuasca experience. The best one, in terms of like, I really loved it, was probably the last one I had in Peru. No, the last one I had the second last time that I went. So I'd been living there for a couple of months now. We'd formed this community of people. We all loved each other. It was amazing, wonderful. The connection was really deep. And these people, to me, are my brothers and sisters still to this day. Diego as well. And now we were leaving, so it was this big farewell. And he gave us the brew, we all drank. He gave me a big cup that day, and I knew that this brew was pretty strong because we sampled it before. It was a bit of a knockout. And I drank it, and I said to the plant, to the brew, my intention, all I want is a beautiful farewell ceremony. And the most interesting thing was, I virtually had no experience in that ceremony in any psychedelic sense. What it did was it came in and it kind of just parted. So I was up, obviously I was in a very good mood, it gave me the vibe, but it parted from my consciousness in terms of just like getting in there and doing some hectic things, and you just experienced this incredible community. It was just an amazing thing, the singing together and the being with each other on this day when we were all leaving. That was a very powerful ceremony.
What did you learn that was most useful in terms of working with the medicine?
Oh, there's a couple of things, Intention. Intention is a big one. I always found that whatever intention I had for my ceremony would manifest itself almost every time in a way that I did not expect. So I said, give me something beautiful, and it did by not being there. That's a good example. So that was certainly one thing. Every time that I've asked for something, I wanted an insight, I wanted some sort of healing, I wanted healing for someone else. It gave it to me in a very different way than what I was experiencing, what I was expecting. The other thing is, I think it's the most difficult thing in the world, is letting go. It's so easy to say and so difficult to do. It was difficult for me in my first ceremony, and it remains at times very difficult. You're sitting there and it's taking you into some hectic place, and you really just should flow with it and flow through it. but you hold on. You're like, no, man, I don't want to go there. And of course, the plant's saying, no, fuck you, you're coming in. And so, and so you have a little bit of that wrestle. And so letting go is one of the most important things.
How would you say ayahuasca has changed you?
I would say that ayahuasca, and I think ayahuasca has really changed my life. Like when I first started my journey with psychedelics in any real sense, I was also a Richard Dawkins type atheist.
Look at us now.
Yeah. I'm not a Richard Dawkins type atheist anymore. So that's the first thing that was shifted, although that really wasn't shifted with ayahuasca, that was more mushrooms. Ayahuasca gave me life purpose. It changed my way of relating to other people. It changed my way of relating to the world, of looking at where I think the world should go, how I should be in the world. And it again gave me a vision for where I should go and how I could work with people.
When you were in Peru, you worked with some other plants. Could you tell us about those, and were they complementary to ayahuasca? One in particular. So I worked with Salvia divinorum while I was there. I had my first real connection to Salvia. If no one has ever tried it, it's. We have a fan in the front row.
I don't know if she's a fan. This particular experience is probably the subject of a whole other talk. That's my friend Trish, by the way. I had my first real connection. I tried it a couple of times. It was weird, and then I connected with it. Actually, with Diego. It was just him and I trying it out. That's a total dissociative. So what my body is going through and what my mind is going through is not the case in ayahuasca. In ayahuasca, I'm aware, no matter how much I'm journeying, I'm aware of the room around me, the songs being played. Salvia, there's none of that. It takes you and off you go. I also worked with wilca seeds. We snorted them. I can definitely recommend not doing that. You probably know. Crush them up and snort, and it doesn't go down like cocaine. You really have to snort the thing in. And then I had about an hour of an interesting trip, and then about 3 days of black shit pouring out of my nose. Those were more like messing around. The one that I actually did a lot of work with in any real meaningful way was Wachuma, the San Pedro cactus. Actually, its traditional name is Wachuma. And it's so interesting. When the first time that I went and I worked with Diego, I was doing the workshop. I didn't take Wachuma. I just simply took ayahuasca. The second time, because I was there for such a long time, and I thought, yeah, I'll try Wachuma. And it wasn't done in any sort of ceremonial context. You just, you went for a hike but there was something about it which it's an incredibly profound and beautiful experience if you get it, if you get it nicely. And when I say that because Elaine and myself, and probably a number of you might have been trying to use Wachuma here in South Africa, and you might find that what you're using isn't very strong. You take it, yes, things glitter a little bit, but you don't really have any sort of powerful transformative experience like you might describe on ayahuasca. The mescaline content of the Wachuma in Peru is much higher, and when you take it, you have some really, really interesting things. But what I really found, which was quite interesting, was the sort of like dynamic that existed between Wachuma and ayahuasca. We were drinking ayahuasca at least once a week, and obviously for a lot of people it would bring a lot of stuff up. You would go, it wasn't always the light. Some people had some very difficult stuff that they would wrestle with, and in wrestling with it, dealing with some of their darker issues, they oftentimes ayahuasca would open the door, but now they had to do the work to go and like, okay, now I've got to go deal with this crap. And they'd come out shaken, and they'd think about it, and they'd pray about it, and they'd work through it, and they'd talk about it. When they came to a point when they were kind of ready to almost close it, Wachuma was by far the best way to close it. Not another ayahuasca ceremony. Wachuma somehow just brought you back into the love and the light that you were before the darkness entered into your life. And I saw that a number of times. One actually my housemate when I was living there is a girl named Maggie. Very, very profound way. She rediscovered herself, her femininity, and that was through the wachuma. The ayahuasca opened the darkness. The wachuma helped her close it off, and I couldn't believe it. And she's a totally transformed person now.
Yeah, I've had a similar experience with San Pedro, and I looked in the mirror, and I've never seen such a beautiful person in my life, and I realized it was myself. And Leslie Myberg is coming out in December to do some San Pedro ceremonies, so please watch the Plant People group if you are interested in working with Peruvian San Pedro. Thank you for that, Lyndon. Now, you've mentioned some dark aspects. Well, sorry, you haven't mentioned, but you were supposed to mention. But what we wanted to talk about is, often we hear about the dark side of ayahuasca and dark practitioners and people on the dark path, dark shamans, and I know that you've spoken about some facilitators in Peru who work in certain dark ways, and you encountered some of those. Could you tell us something about that? And it's just something I think that maybe people should be aware of and be very careful when choosing who it is you choose to work with, especially in South America.
Yeah. Okay. So that's absolutely correct. There were people that I came across which, just to put it mildly, I'm glad I did not drink with. I'll give you one example. There was a guy named Francis. I think he was actually Canadian, and he'd come over to Peru, and he discovered ayahuasca, and he fell in for it, and he felt the calling, and so he started to serve the medicine. The end result of that, like after a year or so of doing that, he literally had this small harem of girls that would follow him around. And he had literally, we laugh, but it was actually disturbing to see. And once in a while, I try and engage with them and say, like, what the hell are you doing? Not as rashly as that, but you couldn't say anything bad about Francis. They'd want to kill you. Literally physically attack you. The thing that I began to realize is, and you hear about sorcery and stuff, and I don't know, we might hear a little bit about sorcery later, particularly in the jungle. We also heard about it up in the Andes, where you knew that one shaman was doing psychic attacks or psychedelic attacks or entheogenic attacks or energetic attacks on other shamans, and people had to, and that's why we talk about protecting the space, because you want to protect it from the outside darker influences that might be coming in, all of that sort of stuff. Be that as it may, whether you believe it or not, one thing I can say for certain is when you drink ayahuasca, there's a certain vulnerability in you. No matter who you are going to be vulnerable unless you have an immense amount of experience with that medicine. And what you do find is you find these people who take advantage of that vulnerability. And this is exactly what Francis had done. He knew these girls were now opened up to him, and they opened up to the love and the light and the space, and he literally brainwashed them. When you are serving ayahuasca, you have to, I don't serve ayahuasca, I'm not called to do it, but I think that those people that are called to do it need to be very mindful of how easily an ego trip can slip into that whole thing. Yeah. And that was true in Peru.
Yeah, and it's very sad. And remember that, you've got the CIA have been using these medicines for dubious reasons too. So the plants are a tool, and sadly that you've got to be careful who you are drinking with. They have incredible transformative purposes, but there is unfortunately a dark side too. Now, what differences have you found in terms of drinking medicine in South America and drinking medicine in South Africa? Because you didn't actually know that you could drink medicine in South Africa, which was why you kept going to South America. And
I did know. I did know. Like the first time that I researched ayahuasca, I saw that there was a community in Rustlers Valley that was doing it. But I thought to myself, no, you've got to do this in South America. Like Rustlers is just going to be a bunch of hippies. So apologies to any Rustlers people here. That's all my prejudices right there. I can tell you, so I can't speak for the Rustlers. I drink ayahuasca. I'm actually going to be drinking ayahuasca on Saturday in Magaliesburg. There's a couple of communities, a couple of facilitators I've drunk with here in South Africa. Lovely experiences. There's nothing wrong with drinking ayahuasca in South Africa at all. One of the fundamental differences I found was really what Diego was doing. Diego is creating this this and creating a space that's beyond just his temple. He's creating a community of people that are, shall we say, ayahuasca minded, and they're international travelers that come from everywhere. When I was living there, there were a number of people that were living with me. A housemate, Maggie, I spoke about. There were a number of other people very close to me, and there was that community. I happen to know that community is now growing larger and larger and larger, but it's there, and it's really based around drinking ayahuasca. People have come to be with Diego not because he sings nice songs, not because he's got a nice house, but because they want to be in the ayahuasca space. When I drink in South Africa, I go to the Magaliesberg to drink, or I'll go to someone's house to drink. We'll have a drink. It's an awesome experience, but then you go back home, and you're immediately reintegrated into Johannesburg, South Africa, whatever it is. When I was there in this community in Pisach, you are just in that community. So the people that I'm living with, that I'm feeling so strongly connected to, that I'm really feeling bound to, are in the ceremony with me. They're with me afterwards. We're going to the market together. We're having lunch in the market, or we're going for a hike with Wachuma up the mountain, or whatever it is, together. So I would say that would be the fundamental difference. I can't say that that's the difference between drinking in Peru and even drinking in Pisach in general. It was the difference between the community that I connected with and drinking with them versus drinking here in... I mean, Elaine mentioned the need for greater community. We don't have anything quite like that here. At least in Joburg, you know.
Yet. Super. So, yeah, in terms of, would you recommend this journey to others?
I would. Like I said, I don't think you have to go to South America in order to drink ayahuasca. It's a very expensive proposition. When I knew this talk was coming up, we did the little experiment to see how much a ticket would cost. Nowadays, the rand has gone through the toilet. A round trip for a single person to get to Cusco, if you want to go where I went, it was about, the cheapest we found was 30,000 rand. Okay, so 30,000 rand just to get there, and then obviously you've got to, if you want to stay any sort of length of time, you're going to have to be able to support yourself. Although I must say that's not expensive. The flight is by far your biggest cost.
But you have to buy water.
Yeah, when you're there, you have to buy water. You can shower in the water, but you can't drink it unless your digestive system is made of iron. No, unfortunately the water supply is tainted. Actually, like that little video that you saw there does present a very pretty picture of what Pisach is. There's a lot of other sides to it. There is poverty around. A lot of the houses are impoverished. The people live in poverty. There's some alcohol and that whole alcohol and poverty thing. There's an immense amount of plastic around because so the companies the Nestle's of the world and the Coca-Colas of the world have provided bottled water. You think that they'd provide water treatment plants, but no, they provide the bottled water. So what you see everywhere is this, and that's very disconcerting against this beautiful landscape. It's just bottles of plastic everywhere. Sorry, so would I recommend it? Yes, absolutely, but don't think, it's a beautiful experience, but don't think at all that you need to that you need to go there in order to have the meaningful, super transformative experience. Having said that, the way of life in Peru is wrapped around ayahuasca. You have couples who have ayahuasca in their homes, and they will whip out the ayahuasca at night when they're having an argument. So actually, maybe something we should do is have an argument and drink a cup and consult the plants in order to sort the problem out. And that's how integrated and embedded ayahuasca is in their way of life. And so, if you want to go and experience what that is, yeah, I do recommend it. But
Wonderful. Let's give Lyndon a round of applause. Thank you. Okay, Lyndon, I'm going to ask you to move down a seat, and I'm going to ask Janine, our next guest, to come up. And as she comes up, we've got a little video to remind her what it was like, because Janine has been to the jungle. So to bring back some fond memories.
Hi, everyone. Some are good memories, some are not so good.
Linda?
Bottled water.
So I think that you should feel quite inspired after watching that. Want to get down and dirty? Well, Janine has, and we're very proud of her, and she's going to be sharing with us about her experience. So Lyndon was more on the civilized Andean side of the world. Janine's actually been to Peru as well, and to the Amazon jungle. So welcome, Janine.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
All right, so give us an idea, what was it like to be in the jungle?
Well, I love the way Lyndon had this lovely enclosed space. We did our ceremonies in what's called a maloka. It's just a floor. It's got a couple of poles and the roof. So at night when you walk in, you'd first kind of shine the torch and see if there's no tarantulas doing this, that kind of thing. So you'd have to sort of... And one night I was sitting doing a ceremony, I got this poke on my back. I thought, I don't know what that was, because you can't turn on a light, it's got to be dark. So that was part of it. Also, washing your hair in the Amazon, in the brown water, dirty water.
And I think that we have a romantic notion of what the Amazon jungle's like, but from what I've heard, it's unfortunately litter has become a problem. Dirty nappies going down the Amazon River and this sort of thing. Did you see much of that?
A little bit of it, but not too much. When we left Iquitos, I went from Lima, we went up, it's right up north. When they had the Spanish Inquisition, they apparently killed all the shamans below. You cannot get to Iquitos. You can only get there by flight or by boat. And so a lot of them were saved at that time. So when you're on the Amazon River there, you'll see little bits here and there, but it's at the town, Iquitos, when you leave there, that it's horribly dirty.
Okay.
You go and buy food, there's all flies sitting there. Yeah, you've got to eat. So you've got to eat, but you eat.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So
that wasn't
the food,
yes.
Tell us about the food.
Well, the one day we went to the zoo as well on our way back, and you go and buy the food, but they all swatting flies off of it, and there's worms, and there was a whole lot of... That was at the local market.
So not for the faint-hearted, yeah. Yeah. And traveling to the jungle, how did you get there?
Flew to Lima, did we go? Went to Brazil and then to Lima, and then a flight up to Iquitos. So, and then from the jungle, it was 3 hours in a boat up. It's close to where the Nene River crosses the Amazon. That's where we were, in a little village there.
And was it physically strenuous?
A lot of it was... I'd had a stroke on the way in the plane on the last flight.
Oh,
so, and I kept falling over, so I had this 20-kilogram backpack which I kept heading to the side with. So that for me it was. There was a couple of places where you needed to climb, but generally it wasn't too bad.
Okay.
It wasn't too bad.
So you're a trooper, hey?
Yeah.
Shame. Now, your experience of the local people, how did you find them and how did you communicate?
A couple of years ago, spent about 6 weeks in Portugal, and I had a lot of Portuguese friends. So I was trying to use the few Portuguese words I knew and changing them into Spanish. Some of them are similar, some not. So that was a little bit of a struggle. But the course that we did, we had an interpreter that interpreted everything for us. Okay. On the course. Yeah, it was close to 2 months.
Super.
We stayed.
I just wanted to check, the people at the back, can you hear? Is the volume all right? Okay, good, great, thanks so much. Now, what I wanted to ask you, how did you choose the person that you wanted to work with? How did you find him? And tell us about the specific shaman.
Okay. It kind of all just came together for me. I was at a sweat lodge one night with 6 other guys in Pretoria, only women there, and the one guy had just returned from doing the same course, and I heard about ayahuasca sort of quite a while back, but never took much notice. And then that night we were talking, and he said that he'd just come back, and I just kind of just knew that was what I had to do. So I then did the research, and from meeting him from about 2 months, I was on my way to Peru, organized everything, paid bills ahead in advance, got my mom to look after my place and my son. And yeah, then I went. So I did, for me, everything just came together. I didn't really choose a shaman. That was the course that was being offered, and so that's what I did. The shaman himself, I really liked him. He had a very nice energy. I had 2 challenges that I felt that I wasn't very happy about. The one was he was very money orientated, which I don't enjoy that. I'm more on the spiritual side. So that was the one thing. And then the other thing was we were all kind of threatened. You don't break any of the rules because Mother Ayahuasca will punish you. She's a punishing energy. And I had quite a big argument with him. Kind of said, if that's what ayahuasca is, I don't really want to know her, because I don't believe that God's punishing. So I'm not going to be drinking ayahuasca with a punishing God, that if I think something wrong or do something wrong, I'm going to get whacked. So I did that part. There was 2 things that I didn't agree with. Yeah. But other than that, I really liked him. He was a nice guy, very nice.
Can you describe some of the rules that he imposed on you?
Well, there were... The rules with the dieta are no sugar, no salt, no spices, no oil, no sex, a whole lot of stuff. Wasn't too concerning in the jungle. Yeah. But the one lady had fancied one of the guys in the village, and there was big trouble about that. He was on and he was fighting with her, that she was disturbing the ceremonial energy because she was having bad thoughts. And I couldn't agree with that. It didn't quite fit my belief system. Yeah. So that was one of them.
And sometimes it's hard for us to reconcile these traditional belief systems with our Western background, and it's not always compatible.
No. They for me, they're very much 50 to 100 years. The stuff that they do is. It works and it's awesome. The ayahuasca is a beautiful energy, but their belief systems, they don't seem to have shifted with the times. I don't know, those of you who work with spiritual stuff who are in it a lot, you kind of constantly shifting and moving your energy forward and doing that kind of stuff, and they seem to have rules, and that's the end of the rules. They were made thousands of years ago, but they still apply today.
And no one's questioning it.
Exactly.
It's a bit like religion, like organized religion.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Yeah. That type of thing.
Yeah, and the different tribes have got different rules and different beliefs.
I was with a Shipibo tribe, and they're quite vast in that area. There's a whole lot of them, apparently, all down rivers and whatnot. The Temple of the Way of Light, I've heard very good stuff about them. The diet that they had, I mean, we had, everybody was complaining about the food, because we'd had about 3 or 4 meals that were chicken and 3 or 4 meals that were fish. But I got there the one morning, and with the no salt, the food doesn't taste very nice. So the one morning I got there and I found this whole fish, head and eyes and everything, looking at me. I thought, okay. And then it had this brown stuff that looked like gravy. So I thought, good, something nice. And it was just brown water from the Amazon. So that wasn't too good. But it just...
Yeah, so you are survivor Amazonia, hey?
I didn't feel it was anything crazy. All my friends are going, you're going to get eaten by snakes and spiders, and my son breeds snakes and spiders, so I really don't have an issue with that anyway, and he's got all the tarantulas, so...
I can tell you that Lyndon would not have survived that.
One night we were sitting having dinner and a tarantula fell on my shoulder, and I just got a fright because I didn't know what it was, and then I saw it was trying to catch a moth, and as it sort of tried to run away, the lady who does our cooking, she's trying to swat it, and I'm screaming at her going, no, and she's going, twa, twa, twa. I think she did miss it, but I wasn't impressed with that.
So in terms of the creepy crawlies and just the physical threats to your well-being in the jungle, what are the most dangerous things to be on the lookout for?
Well, in the camp that we stayed, they very much put everything off the ground. Everything's on stilts. So the only real things that can get up, we never really experienced snakes. There was a lot of monkeys. There were snakes, but not that came to the sort of the where we stayed. A lot of very funny, weird insects. They're on my Facebook if you want to see that.
Interesting,
yeah. Some very strange-looking things. And we saw a lot of stuff. Butterflies. It's apparently the capital of butterflies is Iquitos.
Lovely.
So yeah. So, but other than that, we didn't see too much crazy things, insect-wise.
Yeah. And snakes?
Not
too bad?
Not many. If you're walking in the jungle, which we did, we went for a couple of walks, then you bump into some things here and there, but other than that, generally not too bad. You know, you've always got sticks, and they're always poking the grass, and the guys who are walking in front. Yeah.
What Lyndon and I found interesting, we looked at a chart of the most deadly creatures compared to Africa and South America. And Africa, they're all huge things like hippos and rhinos. And in South America, they're tiny things. And I think the most deadly creature is the little frog. You know,
Yes,
and that's what's really interesting. Not that I think a frog is going to, launch itself into attack mode, but yeah, those are the most poisonous creatures that we have to be on the lookout for. So it's the little things in the jungle that get you.
The one guy that I met in Peru, he wanted to come to South Africa, so they brought him to meet me at the hotel when we were on our way back, and he'd actually gone where they burn 3 or 6 holes in, and they put the poison of that frog, and then you get the vision of the jungle, and you can always see everything in the jungle. I wanted to go for that, but it was a little bit chicken at the time.
Don't worry, we bring it to South Africa. Has anyone in the audience had kampun? There we go.
Okay, awesome.
Braver than me. All right, now going away from the jungle, just back to the shaman and the experience of the ayahuasca. Something that's quite significant is, once again, the expense. You said that it was expensive working with him. Did you pay per ceremony? Did you pay each experience?
It was a course that we did, and the course, I think, was about 40,000, and that was a couple of years ago.
And that's over and above.
Yeah, that's over and above the flight and everything else. It's very interesting that you said you did some homework and it's sitting on 30,000, because at the time, I think mine was about 15.
Yeah, mine was too.
Okay, but then I had to do a whole lot of it, and the total trip cost me about 65 grand. Everything that I had to get and take with, and that kind of stuff to.
So better start saving, hey?
Yeah.
Do you feel that the jungle added to your ayahuasca experience? Was it complementary? Because ayahuasca, I mean, my experiences of ayahuasca has been a lot of jungle energy, jungle animals coming in. Mm-hmm. Now, being in the jungle, did you feel that was, like it?
From a certain perspective, it was awesome being in the jungle and doing it. Again, looking at your walls surrounding you, I'm going, that's nice and safe. So for me, the energy in the jungle, it's nice to do it in, but it's absolutely not crucial. I don't feel that you need to go to the Amazon in order to drink ayahuasca. There are many people around here that do. I would just find somebody that's sort of quite strict with the ethics and the ceremonial type stuff, rather than just anybody. So I don't feel you need to go to Peru.
Yeah.
But it had 1 or 2 small advantages.
Okay.
Definitely.
And this was the first time you'd ever worked with ayahuasca. How was your first ayahuasca experience?
It was awesome. I must just mention, when I arrived there, I was the only person that hadn't had coke, LSD, every drug under the planet. So I sort of went, ooh, I'm in the wrong place. But the first experience was really, really awesome. I was told that you could ask her to be gentle, and I did. And she saw I felt her slithering up, and just kind of stopping here. And I thought, ooh, okay. So that was very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So you can ask her to be gentle, and then she is. So that for me
Yeah.
was really, really awesome. I went, oh, okay, we're on a good path here, you know. So, yeah. And then I eventually, sorry about the purging stuff, I eventually got to the point, because they warn you before you start that when it sort of reaches here, you might want to purge, but not to. So I eventually, kind of after a few sessions, got to the point that only when I felt the water coming in the mouth, then I grabbed the bucket. Other than that, I just sit calmly and just let the energy do what it's doing. So
That's interesting. That's
Yeah.
I must remember that. Thank you.
yeah.
And what would you say has been your worst ayahuasca experience? Was it in the jungle?
Oh, yes.
And can you tell us about that?
Well, one night you're supposed to only have visions when your eyes are closed. I sat and I kind of believed that was the end of my life that night. And I thought, my mom doesn't have enough money to fly my body back out, so I best just get out and die that side in South Africa. So I kept my eyes open. It lasted about 4 hours. I kept my eyes open, and I just grabbed my mom in one hand and my son in the other hand, and that's till those 4 hours were over, and then, so okay, then that was over and done. But it was,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it's quite a common experience, having to
Yeah.
face your own death in ayahuasca.
Yeah.
And and would you say you learned something from it?
From that experience or from ayahuasca?
Yeah, from that experience, or maybe still integrating it. Sometimes these do take a while.
Take a while.
Yeah.
From my point of view, drinking the ayahuasca, I can't say I've had a life-changing experience or event, or that's what it's given me, because I've never really experienced any of those. I see spirit in any case. What I've got from a lot of clients that come to me and say, oh, I've had this amazing experience with ayahuasca, a lot of them don't see spirit, and they don't see certain things. So my assumption from that was that it's them just seeing these different things that makes it so life-changing for them, besides other experiences, of course, but that sort of seemed to be the main one that everybody sort of mentioned. So I didn't have that. So that death experience for me wasn't, at the time it was crazy, but it hasn't really, because I feel I understand death, and I've been through it many times in processes that I do, so I didn't fear it, or I wasn't anxious or whatever. I just kind of, I've got to get the body back. You know,
Yeah.
that was kind of my main concern, is my mom and my son. So I just kind of kept my eyes open and tried to pull myself out of the experience, which didn't work very well. But yeah, it lasted 4 hours. It felt like 4 years.
Yeah.
But
One of the wisest things a Shabiba shaman actually said to me that helped me so much was to learn to be comfortable in your discomfort, and that's helped me get through some of the worst
Craziest
experiences.
times, yes.
Now you worked with other plants, and the shaman gave you other plants to diet. And tell us about those plants and what they gave you, what they taught you, and was it beneficial?
Yes. First of all, just one thing I want to mention is our hands were all painted with Shipibo patterns, because when you go to anybody's home in Peru, they automatically try and feed you, and in order for you not to turn them down and then be insulted, you have your hands painted. So everybody, the day we arrived, got the hands painted so that nobody could offer us food that wasn't dieta food. Okay, so that was number one. We did the ayahuasca every second day. We added about 12 different other plant spirits to that. Some of the names I cannot pronounce at all. One was tobacco, which was great. Mostly what they gave us was the feeling that you felt there was a different energy. Some was a strong masculine energy, others was a soft, others were playful. They all had their own individual personality energies, if you want to call it that. So that I found very interesting. You know, you sort of drinking this thing, you go, okay, what's coming up? And it's this like really strong energy. And some are sort of forceful, no, not forcing you, but that forceful, very strong, powerful energy. And then others is this gentle, like, you know, little playful type energy. So, yeah.
That's lovely. And tobacco is also one of my plants, and I love that you mention it because it's so misunderstood. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with tobacco?
Well, at one stage, the tobacco for me had a really great energy around it, and I connected very well. Everybody that came on the course had to smoke. So those that weren't smokers had a problem because you cleanse your body with the smoke and the aqua de Florida. Every time you start a ceremony, during the ceremony, if you have any bad experiences, you supposedly drink the aqua de Florida. I drank about that much out the bottle my night. And okay. So
Can you just describe what aqua de Florida is for those who may not know?
it was apparently originally made as a cologne, but it is the most awesome. I've done spiritual work for a long time, and when I found that, I knew you just clean the aura, chup chup, and it's done. You don't need to sit and energy work it. So for me, it's an absolutely phenomenal. I keep importing it to get more because I won't work without it, and I use it for just about everything. Yeah.
Lovely. And yeah, it's just lovely to hear about the personalities of the plants. So you drank ayahuasca how many times?
Well, it was over just under 2 months, and I can't remember how many times. And it was every second night that we drank. The one time we drank
another
another
lot,
night.
eh?
Oh no! Before I went there, I struggled to purge, so I really had a problem with the purging as well.
It's a lot of
Not because there were
ayahuasca.
other people, just because it doesn't come up.
Who wants to drink every second night? You on board? Let's have a get together. Now you say that they added different plants, and you could sense the person. Did they add it to the ayahuasca brew?
No.
Okay.
You would drink it in the morning. When you got your medicines, they were before sunrise always. So we would do the other medicine at sunrise, and then we'd go into the night ceremony with that.
Yes.
The one plant, I really don't know the name. It was seeds that you took 12 of them and you chewed them, you swallowed them, and then you had to drink, I think it was 7 or 9 liters of water.
Sure.
But they had this big bucket.
I hope it was an Amazon River water.
Close. And it had all sorts of stuff floating in there. It didn't matter. You had to take your dog bowl and scoop it out and just down this water as fast as you could. It was to get all the parasites out your intestines. So the idea was to fill your whole body with water, and then you still talking, and you just, this whole spout comes out, and then you've got to keep going and do some more. That was a bit horrendous. That was all before 6 in the morning, or whatever time the sun came up. So that one wasn't. So that way, I forget the name.
Yeah.
I forget the name because we learnt all the Spanish names for them. So I forget the name of that one. Sorry.
And I think that's something that we just don't unfortunately get often in South Africa, is those sort of experiences from a traditional shaman and that kind of knowledge that they have working with other plants, and that's really quite special. It's the understanding of the personalities of plants and those dietas. And the other thing that they do, and that they taught you some of, were something called icaros. Could you tell us what an icaro is?
An icaro it's mainly from the Shipibo tribe, as far as I understand. And it's a song that they sing to respect and give Mother Ayahuasca respect and love and that kind of thing. So we had to learn, I think there were about 12 icaros. Now, Shipibo is a language that's not even spoken, so, I mean, not even written, so they're just kind of putting these words together on how it sounds. And when we arrived, we also got a little MP3 player with batteries, and we had to sing these songs every day, because at the end of it, we had to present our ceremony. And we had to sing for the 4 hours, or so that one still gets me. So yes, but it's for me it's a very sacred thing. The icaros to sing. I mean, just now when you put that on, my whole body went, and I got goosies all over, because it's that whole energy that just comes through.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's lovely. Janine, thank you so much for sharing.
Only a pleasure.
Let's give her a round of applause. Ian, please come and join us. And while Ian comes up, I just want to show you some other reasons why you may want to consider going to South America. One that is very dear to my heart, alpaca. Do you know that alpaca have no teeth on their bottom jaw, so they cannot bite you? No. I have a very serious ambition to become an alpaca farmer. Now, there's another image I've got here, which is Machu Picchu, which is, I think, one of the most beautiful places in the world, and Ian has actually been there. Let's welcome Ian. Thank you so much for being with us.
Good evening, everyone.
Now, Ian, whereabouts in South America did you travel to?
So I started off in Cusco, and we then traveled down, took a train down to Machu Picchu, and we went up to the top of Machu Picchu, and then we flew back to we went back to Cusco, which is an amazing place to visit. I mean, that's where the very famous buildings, where the Spanish built their buildings on top of the Inca buildings, and as soon as there's an earthquake, all the Spanish buildings collapse, and the Inca buildings remain standing. It's quite an amazing place to visit. But then we went back to Lima, which is the capital of Peru, and we went down to Iquitos, which is the same jungle city that you were in. Up, down. Okay, sorry. When I went there, this was I was there in 1998. April 1998. So it was quite a long time ago. It was before ayahuasca tourism had become the norm. It was long, there was a lot of it happening, but it was long before it became fashionable to do it. It was, yeah.
And what was it that caused you to go to South America?
So a friend of mine had, firstly Fred Alan Wolfe books, and a book, Plants of the Gods, if I recall, had spoken about all the different various sacred plants and plant medicines, and I'd read that book probably in about 93, 94, and then Fred Alan Wolfe, and then a friend of mine actually traveled to South America in 1995, in about July 95, and he also went to Peru, and he took a treacherous journey. He got the name of a shaman somewhere. I don't recall where he got into the jungle, but he took a truck on a crazy road into the jungle where trucks had fallen off the side of the road, and he was on the back of this truck, and they went deep into the jungle, and they found this shaman, him and his sister, and they did a ceremony, and they came out all right with all their limbs intact. So I started considering going into the Amazon at that point and doing DMT. There wasn't ayahuasca was not available at all in South Africa. Then Frick from Russell's Valley. I'm one of the Russell's Valley hippies, by the way. Okay. So Frick from Russell's Valley. This was now about 90. This was also about 1998 or 97. Brought Eduardo Luna out to South Africa. So sorry, this is 98. Got to get my dates right. Excuse me if I make mistakes. And he brought Eduardo out to South Africa, and we went down to Russell's Valley and did an ayahuasca ceremony with Eduardo in the original Rustler's house, which burnt down. I think it burnt down 3 times. This was the first one prior to all of those burning downs. So Eduardo, interestingly enough, Eduardo was he never saw himself as a facilitator or as a server of ayahuasca. He was more a carrier, and he believed that he would give you the brew, he would say a brief prayer or something, give a whole talk beforehand, beautiful speech, beautiful talk about it, give you a phenomenal dose of the strongest ayahuasca that exists, like from the Barquinha Church in Brazil, and then you were literally on your own. It was you could crawl to him for some help at one point in the evening, and he might just blow some smoke over you, and then you went back to your own, and you were like, oh my God, Anyway, Frick never did ayahuasca ever again after that night, and I did ayahuasca with a woman who I went on to marry, and she had traveled to South America, and she had spent a year in Brazil, in South America, traveling around, and actually ended up traveling into the jungle and doing work with the Santa Daime community inside the jungle. So we decided for our honeymoon that we were going to go Peru, and that's where Lima, where Cusco and Machu Picchu started off as this beautiful shopping spree and this staying in this hotel with the original conquistador had. If I go on, just stop me.
No. I'm loving this.
So, where the original conquistador had set up his little house, it was now a hotel in Lima. Beautiful, magnificent building. And we then flew down to Iquitos, up to Iquitos, and then went into the jungle and did a workshop with Eduardo, a psychologist, Silvia Polivoy from Argentina, Pablo Amaringo, and then one of Eduardo's teachers from Iquitos.
And that's Pablo Amaringo's art behind us. He's a very famous late visionary artist. Yeah. It was discovered by...
Sorry, I can see it there. Okay.
Just for the audience.
Okay.
Yeah.
So shall I carry on about that?
Yes, please.
All right, so,
please.
So, it's interesting because essentially, wherever you go, there you are. Where you can't run away from yourself. So you can do ayahuasca in South Africa, or you do it in Brazil. You're still taking yourself with you, and I think that is your biggest problem. It's also anyway. So traveling into the jungle, but I think that any inner journey that takes place is always a physical journey that mirrors that inner journey. So the physical journey that you're taking of traveling into the jungle, you're actually traveling, it gets mirrored by this beautiful journey that you're taking on inside. And when you travel into the Amazon, you're traveling into the deepest, darkest part of the jungle, and you're traveling into the deepest, darkest part of yourself, the deepest aspect of yourself. And that's, I think, also when you're going into the jungle, what's interesting is that specifically Iquitos. Iquitos is, at that point in time, was the largest jungle city in the Amazon, including all of the Amazon cities. So we're talking the whole of South America. And it had a population of about 300,000-400,000 people. And so it's a very much, there's a lot. It's a tough city. It's a tough jungle city to exist in as a human being, and there's a lot of infighting with all of the shamans. They're always fighting with each other, But I think the misconception as well. I don't know. It sounds like, you made it sound like everyone is taking ayahuasca, or everyone's taking San Pedro, all those guys. No, that's not really the case. It was my experience. My experience was that, and it's strangely enough, I've met a Brazilian in South Africa. I started speaking to her about ayahuasca, and she was from Brazil. And she said, well, those are your sangomas. We don't go near that kind of stuff. So your journey is, it's very much, anyway, sorry, I'm getting...
No, please,
okay?
Please.
All right. So what's interesting is that Eduardo did his dissertation, which is available online, and I'd highly recommend that anyone read it. And he documented a lot of this information that I'm sharing with you. And even in that dissertation, there's information about, just generally how the shamans, there's always evil spirits. There's always this infighting taking place. There's protection taking place. There's this kind of, and you have to go in there. You really have to have your senses and your wits about you, and you've got to make sure that you just trust your gut. And if you feel, I am not going to drink, or I feel uncomfortable drinking, don't drink. Don't go there. And at the same time, you're feeling very uncomfortable about, well, you're actually going through a process and you're there to process. So Eduardo also, as I mentioned earlier, Eduardo didn't really have any major, he didn't discern in terms of who he would give ayahuasca to and the dose, and who he would invite into ceremonies. And I think that caused quite a bit of friction between him and Sylvia, who was a lot more discerning. But I'll go into more detail just now about that. So,
no, it's actually a very valid point, and it's the dark side, unfortunately, of South America. And at one point I was very obsessed with going to South America to do a shamanic apprenticeship myself. But what I realized was, there's so much sorcery, and it's actually so sad. And the traditions of the South American shamans are so much of the teachings is about, warding off and protecting yourself from the attacks of, the shaman who's down the river. And that's not necessarily our way. And, you know, in our culture, you know, I'm hoping that we're forming something new, and we've got a much lighter and hopefully a much, we're evolving into a new path. And those traditions are not necessarily relevant to our way of working with medicine. And yeah, it is quite sad that there's all this jealousy and sorcery going on, but it is real. It's very, very real, and there's a dark side.
So we arrived in the jungle. One of my recommendations is always arrive early, because we had to catch a boat trip upriver at night. Just also, please excuse me, I'm not used to talking about these kind of experiences. It starts bringing up a lot of other memories, and all these things start flashing, so I start getting uncomfortable in my own skin. So I'm just kind of trying to dissipate that uncomfortableness in terms of sharing this with people. They're very personal and private experiences, and ayahuasca has played an integral aspect in the development of my own psyche in terms of how I've dealt with issues in my own life, and given me a very interesting ability to work with those kind of, with a lot of very difficult life issues. And I can come back to those a little bit later as well. So we arrive in the jungle. My experience is very different to yours. So we arrived at night, got on this boat, and we're literally traveling upriver on a tiny little speedboat, and there's trees coming down this river, right? I'm like, we're holding onto our seats. This is like, we're going up this mighty river, and we went 2 hours upriver from Iquitos, and we arrived at this beautiful lodge. It was magnificent. It was like a 5-star jungle lodge. You know, I wasn't going to do the $1 a day. I was doing the whatever it costed that. I think at the time, we're talking prices just now. And Eduardo had booked this beautiful lodge, and they arrived, and there was passion fruit, freshly squeezed jungle passion fruit drinks to drink. And we arrived, and it was clean, and there were raised floors of the jungle, and there was a beautiful ceremonial room, and it was really magnificent. It was really, and there were, I think, about 20 of us, about 25 of us on the workshop, and we were in the jungle for 10 days, and we drank 3 times. So we also traveled back to Iquitos twice. So we did one ceremony the first night, which was absolutely magnificent. And the second day, we then traveled back to Iquitos. And, well, anyway, so before I get into that little part of the story, right, ayahuasca it takes no prisoners. Right, as a teacher plant, right? It's literally when you see your soul through your arsehole. Okay, it's kind of like it'll pick you up by the scruff of your neck, and it will chuck you through the universe. And you know, it's not. Everyone thinks it's like you're sitting there going Om. It's not that. It's like you're holding onto these zip lines, going and you're speeding down this, like, you know, and you literally vomit and shit yourself. Right? Okay. You know, and I'm like, I like to remain clean, and I'm like this little anally retentive. You know, like, I don't like vomiting in front of anyone, so I feel this urging coming, you know. I quietly kind of remove myself from the room. I put my boots on, you know, make sure I got my glasses on, go and find a spot in the jungle. And you can't step off the path in the jungle, because you step off and there's no lights. You can't even see what's behind you. It's so thick, you'll get lost. So you've got to be very careful where you're walking. And you're very careful. I'll take my glasses off and put them down, and then it's like, whoa, you know, like this huge, like, it's you know. Anyway, it's crazy. I was, yeah. Anyway, and you know you've had a good purge when you vomit out your nose. So like it's just like, I can put you off this plant. I'll put you off. It's terrible. Okay, don't go there. Don't go there. No.
But it's also
Anyway.
the best thing you could ever possibly do to yourself, yeah.
So, yeah. And especially with Eduardo's ayahuasca, as I said, it was very strong. It wasn't actually brewed in the jungle there. It came from Brazil, from the Barquinha Church, which are a similar church to the Santo Daime community. And we can talk about their ceremonies a little bit later on. Where was your ayahuasca? Was it brewed with the Shipibo tribe in the jungle? Yes. Okay. All right.
Also pretty strong.
Also very strong, and I think it makes quite a big difference having the ayahuasca from that area in the area that you're in as well. So we were taking ayahuasca that Eduardo had brought with him. The next day we travelled back to Iquitos, and we then went into a nature reserve in the jungle, and there we engaged with a engaged. There we met a shaman or a medicine man, but he was actually he was a botanist, and he was growing different varieties of the vine in this jungle space, and different parts of and he was growing different psychotria plants, and he had all of these different plants growing, and he prepared these flower baths for us. So that was so essentially it's taking aqua de Florida, but he had prepared massive vats of it, and he put you into like this river space, and you would go and sit there, and he would pour this beautiful flower essence over your entire body, and you were sitting there in your shorts, and basically it was a beautiful potion that prepared us for our next journey. That was the intention, and it was a magnificent experience. That I can really recommend that. You know, it was also quite interesting going in the jungle into a nature reserve in the jungle. You know, that's you know, our context of a nature reserve and the actual context of what's taking place is very different. And okay, so I carry on.
Yeah.
Okay. We then went to meet one of Eduardo's teachers, and he had 4 teachers. I'm not sure if this was one of the original 4. The man, I cannot remember his name at the time. So one of my recommendations, if you haven't done this, just by the way, just to gauge the audience, how many people you have drunk ayahuasca? If you can put up your hands. Okay, all right. Yeah, and in South America? Okay. All right, so I mean, I'm preaching to the converted, I suppose. It's, all right, just sharing my own experience. But so what happened in the... we go to pick up his teacher, who he was about 86 at the time, and he wasn't well. He was suffering from malaria, and we arrived at his house, and there was a terribly dodgy character sitting there with him, like this really dodgy character. And anyway, we communicated with the teacher and told him we're going to be coming back in 2 days to pick him up and take him back for a ceremony, and he said that's fine. And we went back to the jungle, and we went back upriver to Iquitos. When we came back, this man, to pick up his teacher, this man just happened to be waiting there at the exact time with his little suitcase packed, and he said, I'm coming with you. Right? And I was like, what was amazing about traveling with Eduardo is he's like a walking Google Translate. Okay, he like as people are talking, he's translating, and he's actually, you know, and that was made it an amazing experience traveling with him, because Spanish it's a very difficult language, and it was quite difficult to understand what was, you know, people were saying. But this man came, I had a terrible feeling about this man. Anyway, he decided he's coming with us, and Eduardo said that's fine. And he came back with us on the boat. And Eduardo, anyway, on the way back, Eduardo is translating as this guy's talking, and this guy starts saying, well, you know, he was doing a ceremony a couple of days before, and there was a shaman in the farm, you know, close by, and in his ceremony he could feel this guy attacking him. So he grabbed his shotgun and he went off to kill this guy, right? And I'm looking at what I'm saying, did you actually just realize what you translated? You know, like, you're bringing this guy back with us to do a ceremony, and he's talking about, okay, well, you know, bringing guns. You know, I'm scared of people's guns. I'm not scared of their magic or their, you know, but guns I'm scared of, you know, and this guy's pissed on all these trees. Now I'm going to, you know, like, this is his place, you know, I'm going to be a little bit nervous. And we arrived back with this, with this man, and Sylvia was very upset about it, and she, but in retrospect, thinking about it, in terms of all the infighting, Eduardo, you know, is an anthropologist. He observes, you know, he puts this thing in place, or he's just observing what's going on. He doesn't interfere. And this man came back with us, and it was a very interesting journey. So I'd arrived in the jungle, and I went and found some bamboo, and I'd made a didgeridoo to play during the ceremonies, and so we drank the brew. Sylvia didn't drink that night. She decided to abstain, and this shaman, or this man, he drank, and his teacher had a little bit. What was interesting about Eduardo's teacher is he went from being quite sick to suddenly he was in this very clear, concise space, and he changed quite dramatically in the ceremony. That become quite funny when people started translating what he was talking about. So you know, so you kind of romanticize these Icaros, you romanticize these songs, and you romanticize the personalities behind these songs, And I think that what we forget is they're just human beings, just like us. You know, they and they're also surviving, they learning, they're teaching, they're healing, it's like, but they're the same as us. They might have drunk a lot more, they might know more about jungle plants, but they're the same, and there's the same flaws, and there's the same positive aspects. And I think that for me, it's you have to be very, very discerning when you're choosing who to work with in your space. I think that that's absolutely crucial. I think you've both covered that. So we drank the brew, and this was not local ayahuasca. This was Barquinia Church ayahuasca, and this shaman drank probably 200 mils of Eduardo's. He was 5 foot. He was a short man. It was a very high dose for him, and anyway, at one stage, I was playing the didgeridoo, and he got very upset that I was playing the didgeridoo, and he told me to shut up, and Sylvia told me to carry on playing, and because she wanted me to carry on playing, and it was there was just this conflict happening. Anyway, at one stage during the night, I heard this god-awful purging, right, happening somewhere just outside the lodge, and I thought, oh my God, I feel so sorry for this person. This just sounds terrible. So I got up and I decided to go and investigate and see what was happening. And there was this man, this shaman, just vomiting his guts out, man. And I went and put my hand on his back, and I said, you okay? And he got so cross with me that I was that I even dared to come and try and help him during this vomiting, he kind of so I came back inside, and it was it became anyway, it stopped, and he came back inside, and then this journey started, and it got quite interesting, because what he was capable of doing, what I experienced of him, was that he managed to project himself out his body, right, into this form of this being that was walking around without a doubt, and there was all these snakes. He had all of these snakes coming out of this form, and there was this real entity walking around the room, and it was quite fearful. It was quite scary. It was quite. It was like, wow, this is, and I actually at that point went and sat near Sylvia. I was like, this is quite, you could, I'm sitting next to you, right? You're going to look after me. And then Eduardo's teacher started talking, and he started talking about stuff. So I'm to Sylvia, what's he saying? Please translate. He said, he's just worried about his wife's chickens. They're having a little bit of a problem, I thought he was spouting these great words of wisdom, And it's so. So it was interesting. It was an interesting night. It was a little bit chaotic. There was a Colombian couple that were traveling, and the Colombian, this man, the one journey, he was sitting there and he was basically the whole night he was going blah, 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 blah. He was like the sound, blah, 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 and he was making this very, very, very strange, funny sound, and I thought so, and I was quite intrigued, and I'm very careful in ayahuasca space to respect someone else's space. Energies start to merge very, very easily, and I think it's absolutely crucial to be completely aware of of your impact that you're having on this entire space, and the potential influence that you're having on everyone around you. So you're very careful of not invading anyone. Well, I specifically am very careful of not invading anyone's space during one of these ceremonies, and unless they really die. So. Anyway, so this Colombian, he had been making this really funny, strange sound the whole night, and they were a very interesting couple. He was a lawyer from Colombia whose father owned these massive cattle ranches, and he had a very interesting story that he told us about. His father had told him, "You're going to become a lawyer, or you're not inheriting any of the cattle ranches." So he had kind of had that vibe about him, and he had arrived in the jungle, and with his Gucci shoes, and it was from Colombia, so that confused me because he was South American. So, it was, anyway, the whole night during the journey he was making the sound, and the next day I went up to him. I said, "Look, I'm just curious as to what you were experiencing. What were you? What was happening inside you? And what were you saying?" So he said, "Well, he became the lowest life form on this planet. He became a protoplasm." And that was the sound that a protoplasm makes, I was just, we just really laughed at that. And then he experienced his ancestors, and then he said he experienced his ancestors in the jungle. And, he went back to his ancestors, and they were lying in hammocks. And I was like, Okay, my ancestors were hunting, and they were like, killing. Your ancestors were lying in hammocks. It was just we just were engaged. We had these very funny stories, and so the worst part of one of my journeys, the worst part was maybe I should talk about the worst part before the best part. So, although you've all done ayahuasca, so yeah, you can probably, or a lot of you have done it. So the worst part of my journey was a death. I can't even talk about this. I was getting nervous talking about this thing. So there must have been a tremendous. I think that a lot of melatonin had kicked in my chemistry, and I started to get very, very, very tired. And I'd read somewhere that you never fall asleep in an ayahuasca journey because bad stuff happens, right? And it was ayahuasca. So I got it one, and I was like, I'm really struggling. He says, yeah, drink more ayahuasca. Okay. That was even worse. That was even worse. There was like, and your body is purged. There's nothing left in your body to purge. It was just like, and it became the struggle to actually stay awake. And I was doing everything I could to keep myself awake and to keep myself from falling asleep. And eventually I just had to surrender to this death and just to die. And I went into this deep, 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 deep sleep, and I died. And which was interesting because I came back and I woke up. Eventually I woke up the next morning and I was fine. I had survived it. But it was a tremendous amount of surrender that I had to go through to allow myself to die, to go through this death, which served me quite greatly later on in life when I did go into a real coma, and I had to navigate my way back from that space without any drugs or anything like that at all. Just it actually, I think the lesson of dying is an absolutely vital lesson that we need to learn. The lesson of surrender, the lesson of, and I'm curious just to hear about all of your experiences, not to sit here and talk about my experience. So one of the best ones, so one of my best experiences was, so if I talk in the context of my experiences, I've taken ayahuasca. I haven't taken ayahuasca in the last 5 years at all, 6 years. And before that I took ayahuasca 58 times. All right, so it was quite a lot of ayahuasca. So I had unbelievable experiences, and I had, there were dark experiences. I had experiences where I had moments with ayahuasca where I never purged at all. I had journeys. I spent 3 months at one stage drinking a teaspoon of ayahuasca every single day and just making my body very, very, very friendly with the brew. And then I went on a journey. And I was just, it was an absolutely beautiful experience. There was no purging. My body had made friends with the ayahuasca. There was no, although from a chemical perspective, you vomit because there are,
MRIs.
Yeah, not, well, the MRs, but they contain, there's another chemical that's contained in the plant. It makes leaves bitter. Sorry, I'm forgetting the, sorry, it's an yeah, it's an alkaloid, but it's a certain that makes the leaves, actually that's what causes you to vomit. But in this journey I didn't vomit. So, so the best experiences were, God, I mean, just absolutely experiencing the interconnectedness of everything. I mean, just seeing the tapestry and the visions, and just feeling at one and knowing my place in the universe, understanding where I fit. And at one stage, becoming aware of the thoughts that I had as a child, and being aware that I could I almost became aware of those thoughts and those actions and those deeds from being a young boy, dropping into this pool of my creation, of my existence, and the ripple effects that they had throughout my entire life. And at one stage becoming aware of, well, my life was, I had certain premonitions as a child about how my life would turn out. And on one ayahuasca journey, I became aware of that premonition. And I thought, well, this is interesting, because my life has worked out a little bit differently. And then years later, that's in this premonition, which I had as a child, which this ayahuasca journey had been quite significant to point out, actually translated into my life. So they were very interesting. So, I mean, besides going into the jungle, right, which I recommend, if that's what you think you need to do. If you feel you need to travel into the jungle in order to experience this aspect of yourself in the jungle, go and travel into the jungle. Do it. But also be aware that you're traveling in the jungle. So one of my most memorable experiences was we were on the Amazon River on a barge, and the sun was going down, and there was this it was a sunset, and there was these beautiful it was seen out of a picture book, and these pink dolphins came, and they started to swim around the boat. And I was like off with my clothes in the water, jump into the river, and I was swimming with these pink dolphins, trees coming down, and everyone else stayed on the boat, and I was like the only one swimming around with these pink dolphins. But from a shamanic perspective, dolphins were bad luck. So it was not necessarily a good thing to do from a shamanic perspective. From my cultural perspective, I'm said, give me pink dolphins, I'm jumping into the water. Like, these are dolphins. I'm never going to get this opportunity again in my lifetime.
Yeah.
I'm doing it. So when you're traveling into and you're starting to take substances and you can also miss some of the beauty of the jungle, some of the, at one stage, which now my ex-wife, but at the time, she became quite ecological during one of our journeys and decided it's a good idea to go and hug trees, and was hugging a tree, and I came out during the journey to find out where she was, and she had been hugging this tree, and what had happened was all these army ants had come out of the tree and thought she was part of the ecosystem, and were now walking all over her in the middle of an ayahuasca journey. Right, so I was looking at her, like, what are you doing? And she was like very carefully taking every single ant. I would have run screaming and jumped in the river, right? So she was like, kept her senses about her, and was like just, taking hundreds of ants off her and just putting them on the ground, and so don't hug trees when you're taking ayahuasca in the jungle. So another interesting. Well, anyway, no, I won't. Okay. Any more questions?
I think just from a time perspective, let's wrap up there.
Okay.
But I think we've really loved hearing your stories, Ian, and it's really been the rich fabric that we've really come here for. We just don't get that anywhere else, and it's the insights that are so valid and so important. And I think we've got mixed feelings about going to South America, but I think it's what we need. We need those two different perspectives that are so important in order to make these decisions, and that's really what this evening was about, to give those two perspectives. What we will do, though, and I don't want my speakers to go away, is at the end of the session we are going to go into questions and answers. So it will be your opportunity to direct your questions at the speakers. But what I'd like to ask is if you could please give our speakers, who've been so generous with their time and so generous with sharing some very personal experiences in a public forum, if you could please give them a very warm round of applause. I think let's go into the question and answer session now. We'll have questions for, let's say, 10 minutes. And then we're going to have our lucky draw. We've got a very nice surprise for you. We've actually got a little plant package and two lovely other gifts. And then we're going to go and have something to eat together and spend some time with each other. And Ethno Trader will also have some amazing other plants on sale. All right, so who's got a question for our audience? For an audience. Yeah, let's ask our audience questions.
Much better.
Much better. Who's got a question? Yes, thank you.
I haven't done a lot of reading, but I've noticed that a lot of people who suffer from depression seem to be drawn to the ayahuasca experience.
Yeah.
Is there a particular reason? Is it beneficial? Why I ask, I have a son that suffers, I think he's borderline bipolar, and I want to know whether it would be a good idea to expose him to this experience or to rather not.
Okay.
Maybe I might be the person to answer that one, because at the time of my first ayahuasca experience, I was diagnosed as clinical depressant and bipolar, and I had been institutionalized 4 times in my life. And I would highly recommend it, to be honest, but it might be something to go into a bit slowly. There's a number of plants. The thing with it is a complicated subject, because in order to work with a lot of these plants, we have to actually move off the psychiatric medications. And my experience is that the psychiatric medications were basically suppressing my consciousness and ultimately making me sicker in the long run. And I was trapped in that, and I was in a very much a fear state of leaving them behind, because I didn't know any better. But ayahuasca was the turning point for me to put all of that behind me, and it enabled me to face my darkest and greatest fears. And my first ayahuasca experience was probably the worst experience I've ever had in my life. But at the same time, I came out of it, and I don't suffer from depression anymore. I can honestly say that. So I suffer from depression from the age of 8. I tried to kill myself for the first time. I was younger than 10. And I can't tell you how many suicide attempts. And I actually passed away, and they brought me back in the ambulance after a hypnol overdose. So that was at the age of 20. And yeah, it has been a very painful life, a very painful path with depression. And ayahuasca, I would say, was the turning point for me. Now, it is a very difficult topic. It is very, it's something maybe to address very slowly. But yeah, I am actually now passionately opposed to some of the medications. Sometimes though, and it is the only route that we can take, but I do feel that they do offer a lot of hope.
Can I just make some
Yes,
comments
no,
there? Because I think
please.
that there's a place for all medicines, Western medicine, plant teacher medicine. When it comes to psychiatric medication, I mean, ayahuasca contains monoamine oxidase inhibitors. So if you're on antidepressants that contain MAOs, you take ayahuasca and you're going to trip for 2 weeks. You've got to be or worse. You can there's very, very high risk that you've got to be very careful with the half-life of the medication that the person's taking. They have to be completely off it. It's not necessarily a cure-all. I really don't at all. I know you might say so, but I think that you have to address it very carefully. You have to go into it. I would recommend a psychiatrist being involved to understand the complexities and the chemical balances involved. It's not something that you can take lightly at all. So yes, yeah.
But he has issues with that, so I've been thinking if I could steer him towards some sort of spiritual path, or
So I have a comment on that. So a lot of these medicines, the psychiatric medicines themselves, are derived from learnings that people have from plants, from the natural world. So the inhibitors that you find in a lot of the psychiatric medicines, they were originally derived precisely from plant sources. So the truth of the matter is, these are just labels that we ascribe to these things. So the label of medicine versus drug versus shamanic brew, or just labels, these are substances that are going to enter into your body. There's an immense amount of political momentum that sits behind what is classified as what that you need to be careful of. So like a lot of psychiatrists, on one hand I absolutely agree with Ian, on the other hand you've got to find the psychiatrist that's open to this. Because a lot of them will go, no, that's not going to work, you need to go. Because if you understand the worldview of a psychiatrist who's been medically trained, is that you really are just a big chemical. So the whole spiritual side of it and so on. So just for what it's worth, there is an immense amount of scientific research now that is starting to show that psychedelics like ayahuasca,
mushrooms specifically,
marijuana to some extent, LSD is also
MDMA
are showing very strong positives. So without wanting to ramble too much, there's an immense amount of history that goes in here, like especially after the LSD movement in the 60s, and a complete shutdown, particularly by the Americans, and then the world followed, of understanding what the potential was for psychedelics to impact our psychologies. Because of that, went dark. Anecdotal evidence was coming out of the jungle, coming out of people who were traveling here or just taking high doses of mushrooms. And shit, man, I felt better. It's only recently that science has been started to fund research again into whether these things have any sort of potential to heal, and what they are finding is that and it's not too much of a stretch to imagine that maybe in the next decade or so you will have psychiatric medicines with psychiatric names and all that stuff actually really are just ayahuasca analogs.
Yeah.
Sorry, just
Agreed,
one thing
yeah.
that I need to add, and I've spoken to Elaine about this. As much as I love ayahuasca and all the other psychedelics that are out there, I've currently got a client that's got HPPD. So he, for the last year, has been hallucinating 24/7. He's had to drop out of law school, all of that. So just when you are deciding to shift over to one of these, please make sure that you've done all your homework. Because now he's coming to me, I've got to try and fix that. But just understand that if that happens, that is a possibility, and take responsibility for that.
Was that as a result of...
Yes, LSD, yes.
There's a very,
And then I've been onto the website, and and not to dampen anything, but just because I wasn't aware of that, a lot of them are saying that Iboga has caused that, and Elaine and myself were actually talking to give him some Iboga as well. So it's just please be very aware of everything that can and can't go wrong, so that if something goes wrong, you can't, okay.
There's a very interesting book called The Secret Chief. I don't know how many people have read or heard of it. The Secret Chief. So The Secret Chief was a book written by a psychologist from in the 60s or 70s, post, when LSD was banned and the use of all these substances became banned. He was actually doing underground work. He was doing psychotherapy using MDMA, using LSD, and using medicines, and he wrote a book anonymously in terms of the use of it and the benefits that were derived from it. And a post is there, posthumously the book was republished in his name, and he was finally given credit for the book. And it's a very, very good read, just to understand, the psychological process, so you can create that support mechanism. And then on the other hand, the Santo Daime community, and in terms of some of the readings, in terms of some of the stories that I've read around that. Now, just interesting enough, the Santo Daime community in South America, I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but like 400 people at a time are taking ayahuasca. They give it to babies. They, teaspoons of it are given to babies. And if you can, how many people have participated in Santo Daime work here? Okay, so the Santo Daime bring another element, religious flavor to it, because they've got all of these hymns that they sing, and they're flavored with a mixture of Christianity and a mixture of songs of shaman jungle songs. But 400 people at a time, there's a separation of men and women. And it creates a very interesting healing space, and there's a much greater community around someone going through a process which would have to be a tremendous healing, a massive healing. There's this huge community, and they're working with us all the time. On the other hand, there are risks involved. So it's all about this balance.
One should rather do your homework and not just punch.
Find a psychiatrist who, like I have a psychiatrist too, because I'm bipolar, I'm on a fuck ton of medication, but he is plant friendly, and I tell him, right, I want to try this. He knows what meds I am on, he knows what my mental state is, and he'll go, Trish, okay, cool, yes, I think this is a good idea, or no, stay the fuck away from that.
Yep.
So if you can find someone like that, so then you can really do your homework, and then there is no risk, because then you know exactly what you're stepping into.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? Yes, Lisa.
Just forgot the name, sorry.
No, Janine, that's fine.
Janine, sorry about that. You said you worked with other plants like tobacco as well.
Yes.
I came across one with my ceremony, the one and only that I did here in South Africa 7 months ago, which changed my life. There was a tobacco there called Harpe, which came from South America. Did you come across it there, and did you really have to make it yourself? Is there no way of actually getting this?
Make what the
the hape, it's a crushed powder that is
Yes,
administered
I
as a
brought
shot.
back a kilogram of the tobacco.
Yeah,
Yes, I
so
brought
make
that
it
back.
yourself.
Yes, it's just a lead roll, so you've got to crush it and do whatever. So, yes, sorry, the question, you want to know...
Just if you came across it and there was no way of sort of purchasing it, you had to actually crush it yourself, make it yourself, put your own energy into it, and that's the only way you
Even the
can actually
ayahuasca
administer
that we brewed, it was a 48-hour brew, and we would take turns to energize it. If it was your 3-4 hours for that time, you've got to constantly put energy, and then it's the next one and the next one. So we constantly did that with all the brews that we did. And yeah, we did the tobacco as well. The tobacco, we actually did, sorry, just two things. We actually did it was a ginger as well. That was the one I remember as well, that we had to snort, and I thought I was also going to not come back because I couldn't get my breath. It was like, and then I had to take another one. So he's got all this stuff.
Typical.
So, yeah.
No.
So yes, you kind of do need to do that yourself.
And I stopped smoking. I was very interested in trying to
Speak to Nash.
All right. Well, we'll do. He's always told.
Yeah, no, we can get it. We can definitely get it, don't worry. Yeah. But be careful if it is addictive.
No,
Yeah,
no,
but yeah, you can.
I was smoking for so long. I've stopped for 4
Yeah.
months.
So there is that side to it as well, because the problem with hape is that it's made from mapacho. Mapacho's got up to 26 times more nicotine than normal tobacco. So it is a plant that you have to use with intention. But yeah, it is definitely available. We can access it for you. Yes, Gillian.
Just got a question for Janine. You said going into the jungle, you had a stroke.
Yes, and sorry, yes.
So, how did you find? You obviously had nerve damage going into the jungle. How did you find the healing? Was there a healing experience with ayahuasca?
When I returned, I found out that, including two, I forget the names, but not Hancock. It was somebody. There was two publicly known people, international people, who also had strokes going into Peru. The year that I went, there was about 15 people that a friend of mine knew, including myself, that had all had strokes going into Peru. So the one night with the ayahuasca ceremony, my whole brain went like a mechanical. I felt all these things going on, but my balance has never come right. Words I cannot remember has never come right. So when I do my work, I channel most of the work. I try not to remember anything because I don't. So I've still had. There's still after effects. When I came back to South Africa, they put me straight into hospital. There was still a clot. My stuff was still waiting to kind of explode. And so since then, I've healed a lot of the stuff myself, and ayahuasca as well. When I did the brain scan, they said that my brain was that of a 20-year-old. So there was no physical damage, but the symptoms of it have not come right yet.
Okay, so you don't look like you had a stroke.
So thank you.
No, I'm trying to be.
No. Thank you. I understand exactly what you're saying. Thank you. Yeah.
Shall we have one last question? Any more? Yes.
This one's for Ian. I was just wondering if you were so intensively involved in ayahuasca, why you stopped using it for the last 5 years?
So, I mean, it's a very personal question, but I lost a child. So my son died, one of my children died. And I haven't been able to go back into to use the plant to deal with that. That's why. So, I have used San Pedro post that, and I used that, I climbed a mountain and drank that and used that as part of the process. But that's why. Okay, it's I'm quite scared of going into an ayahuasca journey. I've been quite, even though I've done it so many times, I still have so much respect for the plant, and it's when I'm ready, it'll form part of that. It'll form part of that process. I think, definitely again.
Once again, I just want to talk about community and like what an incredible gift we are all giving each other just by being here. And Ian sharing with us and all the speakers just sharing with each other. And, You know, when we break for a meal later, just let's celebrate that community, people. That's what this is all about, and let's build on that, and let's share our plant experiences, and more importantly, let's just share our life experiences and hold each other. And sacred space is something that doesn't have to only exist when we're drinking medicine together.